just always was a story that haunted all of us. Anyone that was living in Marble Falls in November 1965 has a memory of this happening to this beautiful young girl. The young girl that was murdered down by Backbone Creek.
The same grade as Danon Lewis.
Yes.
We were in the 8th grade.
She had beautiful blonde hair, and she was extremely quiet.
She was found in a small shed behind the house, hanging from a rafter or something, but her knees were touching the ground. Well, it didn't take, much imagination to figure out something's wrong.
I don't think anybody really believed that it was a suicide at the time.
I don't think she died.
Somebody that was visiting the neighborhood had some peeping Tom issues, was staying within a few houses of Danon's family.
There were other theories other than what was listed on the death certificate.
I do have a copy of the death certificate.
First off, I would have sent the child for an autopsy.
In the absence of a medical examiner, the Justice of the Peace is responsible.
Are you comfortable enough coming up with a manner of death, cause of death?
The death investigation system that started back in the 19th century.
Like the Dark Ages to the modern world.
Is it time to figure out a different system?
At this point, I feel comfortable with what I do.
A Justice of the Peace is an elected office.
Yes, it is an elected office, yes.
Politics does play a role in everything. They're all trying to not have a bunch of unsolved cases laying around. It just seemed more of a fanciful cover-up if nothing else.
I think Danon was such an innocent soul.
She was murdered.
I would love to see it solved.
Maybe we could find the truth.
Hello everyone, welcome back to KXAN Live. I'm your anchor, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our Inside the Investigation segment with investigative reporter Kelly Wiley. Kelly, thanks so much for joining me. Can you tell us what are we going to be covering today?
Well, this week we're talking to KXAN's Director of Investigations and Innovation, Josh Hinkle. I think this is the first time we've had all three of us here together. But you just saw I just got chills listening to the trailer for this investigation. And for those who aren't familiar, every year, the Catalyst team, they produce an investigative series. And this year, Josh and the rest of the team turned their efforts to Texas's system of having justices of the peace determine cause of death. And so my first question to you is, what made you take a look at this issue or this practice?
This was really something that our colleague Arzad Dost was looking at in Williamson County before we even went down this specific Stories case. Really, she was seeing that the population was booming in Williamson County, and justices of the peace there who are responsible for death investigations were feeling a little strapped and wondering if they needed to start exploring the county getting a medical examiner. Through that, we discovered that most of the counties in Texas don't have medical examiners, and so that really kind of led us to looking at specific cases, and this one out of Marble Falls just popped up.
As someone not from Texas, I think when I moved here, that was something that was kind of made me tilt my head a little bit. But is it the case that justices of the peace handle death investigations in every city? What does it look like in other places?
Right. So Texas is unique to any other state. All the other states have medical examiner systems or a coroner who is an elected official, but that's their only job, is to actually conduct death inquests. But in Texas, the elected official that does the death inquest in most counties is a justice of the peace. If you're not familiar with the justice of the peace, they handle 90% of the judicial cases in the state of Texas. There are more than 900 justices of the peace. So they do a lot of different things, from like marriages to some civil cases to even things like dangerous dog hearings. And one of their roles is to conduct death inquests. And so when the county doesn't have a medical examiner legally, that's the justice of the peace's role to do that. When there's an unattended death, they have to go and investigate and then determine the cause and manner of death, and then they have to certify the death certificate to kind of finalize what happened in that death.
Got it. And in larger cities like Austin, we do have a medical examiner. Why is that?
Right. There is a state law establish that, and thus negating anything that they needed to have from their justices of the peace. What we were seeing with the population is that obviously Texas is growing, and so that population threshold now, because of the way the census is tied to the law, is 2.5 million. So if your county hits that, or if you're nearing that, then it's time to start thinking about a medical examiner.
Okay, so again, that trailer, this young girl's face, every time I see it, you just think, and like this community was thinking, what happened here? But why focus on Danon Lewis's case? A young girl whose body was discovered hanging nearly 60 years ago. Why this case?
Well, it was kind of two separate directions we were taking. At the time that Arzo was looking at the Williamson County Justices of the Peace, my other colleague, Dalton Huey, he started looking at this case that we had been sent because and that you saw in the trailer. Ronnie Lewis, he writes a blog called the Angora Chronicles, and he also has it on Facebook. And so basically it's kind of just like what it was like growing up in the Marble Falls area, and one of the cases was the Danon Lewis case, because in 8th grade, he was in the same grade as her back in 1965. So he and his classmates very vividly remember their classmate in this small town dying and being ruled an accident, and then just not believing that, how could this happen? This seems very out of character for her. This needs more answers. And for 60 years, people have just kind of talked about it in the town, and it's been almost one of those myths or urban legends. And so when we started looking at it, and I was talking to Dalton, we realized, hey, there was a justice of the peace that was the person that did the investigation here. I wonder what happened there. And what we learned was that that justice of the peace did not order an autopsy, which justices of the peace can do. They can send a body to another county that has a medical examiner if they don't feel comfortable making a decision in that death. So with that, we were like, this is the perfect case to highlight, because really the system hasn't changed a lot in the 200 years that justices of the peace have existed, at least the death inquest is part of it. There is training and different types of discipline today that can help with the system, but largely it's the same system that it was back in 1965.
Wow. So what challenges did you face trying to figure out this system, since it has been around for 200 years?
Well, the biggest thing is that there was no statewide singular place that the public can access any kind of records with this. So if we were looking for any kind of trends that happen in specific counties or with specific types of death, that would be very difficult to do. So what we ended up having to do was file public information requests with every single precinct in the state of Texas. And again, as I mentioned, there are more than 900 precincts, 900 JPs. And so that was a lot. And obviously we didn't get back all the records because it can be very costly, it can be very time consuming. Every single JP has a different system. And also some of them, weren't familiar with the law. So what we tried to do is piece together what we could and realize that this is just something that lawmakers will probably have to tackle to make better tracking. The other difficulty with this, when you're looking at specific cases, is that Texas law also requires death certificates to be sealed from the public, meaning you cannot see them for 25 years. So the most recent death certificates you can see in the state of Texas date back to 1999.
Wow. And it's one of those things where we live our lives and we just kind of accept systems as they are. And I think what's incredible about Catalyst specifically is you're peeling back the layers of something that we all probably experience on some level at some point and realize that there are things that we can draw a more critical eye on. I would imagine there are some cases that even the JPs would consider kind of beyond what they're comfortable ruling on. You talked about this earlier about what they can do when they feel that's the case. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Justices of the peace do have the discretion to order an autopsy. They can contract with another county that does have a medical examiner to send a body there for an autopsy with the trained forensic pathologist who is a medical examiner. They have at least 9 years of schooling, the medical examiner does, so they're specifically trained to understand what happened in that death from a medical standpoint. The Justice of the Peace doesn't really have any kind of medical training. They do get some training as part of their required hours of training when they first become a Justice of the Peace, and then they have some concurrent hours each year, but it's nowhere near what a medical examiner would have. So if a Justice of the Peace feels uncomfortable making a decision after they go to start the death inquest, they can send that body to another county or to a private medical examiner. But that can be really costly. We found some counties pay as much as $4,700 per body. So if you're thinking about counties like Burnett County, where Danon Lewis died, in the past 5 years there, Justices of the Peace have investigated over 800 deaths. So they've decided to only send about half of those for autopsies to another county. So there can still be a lot of questions, but it's also just a matter of budget for each county as well.
Mm-hmm. And for those who may be watching who are familiar or not familiar with how the Investigates team at KXAN operates, we're always trying to bring our findings to lawmakers, people who are, have some authority or some control over the situation. What reaction did lawmakers have to your reporting?
Well, we spoke in the series, if you watch it, has Senator Tan Parker, who has been involved in the medical examiner and population threshold issue in the past. When we kind of brought this concern to his attention, he agreed that he wanted to look into it. One of the things that he did in a recent session was make it possible for his home county at the time, which was Denton County, to actually partner with nearby Tarrant County and a few other partner with Tarrant County to continue this long-standing relationship they have to have a regional medical examiner's office. So really it's like having one medical examiner for 4 counties. So in those other 3 counties around Tarrant, they don't use their Justices of the Peace for death inquest, even though they don't have a medical examiner right in their own county. But it's because they use taxpayer money to help fund and staff and pay for resources in the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. So he helped kind of make sure that regional agreement was able to continue as people continue talking about what's the right population threshold, how much money would it cost for us to establish our own medical examiner office. And so from our conversations with him, it seems like there might be an interest from some lawmakers to have a discussion about how can we get more regional medical examiner districts in the state of Texas. So some of these counties that haven't quite hit that population threshold, but do want that expertise of a medical examiner more regularly instead of just body per body, then maybe they can establish something like that.
I'll be interested to see. I mean, it's coming up. People are already filing bills, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So Catalyst always has an interactive element to its investigation. We were all talking about this in the morning meeting yesterday, just how many things there are to discover within this investigation online. Can you walk us through what viewers can find?
Sure. When we established the Catalyst unit within our investigative team back in 2019, we knew that we wanted it to be digital digital first because we know that so many of our KXAN viewers are experiencing our content on our digital platforms. And so we wanted to make sure that we were thinking about them as well when we're creating some of this really interesting content. This is the 7th Catalyst project we've done, and you can find them all on KXAN.com. This one specifically, as you mentioned, is called Hanging on Backbone Creek. And if you go to the main page there that we have pulled up, you can scroll down past the trailer, which we already watched, and you'll see this kind of scene that we've created that is supposed to represent kind of what 1965 Marble Falls was like. Over on the tree on the right, you can kind of hover over each of those little boards and they highlight. You can click through if you wanted to, and it will take you to different aspects of this web project. You can watch the docuseries, you can listen to our podcast, and we have several other supplemental stories to help you understand the timeline and the legality of the Justice of the Peace and Medical Examiner system. Scrolling down, you can find a map of what Marble Falls and specifically the neighborhood where Danon Lewis lived in 1965 looked like, and below that is more about our team and links to our past Catalyst projects, which also covered big statewide systemic issues. So a lot for you to explore, so maybe that's a good weekend dive for you.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Again, this is all we have for our Inside the Investigation episode of this week. Remember, you can find this story on our website, kxan.com. Thank you.